Foley is an old name, a very old name. But nothing in Ireland, except maybe the land itself, is as old as Newgrange. This ancient tomb was nearly 2,000 years old at the birth of Christ. For 5,000 years it has witnessed the arrival of the many and varied peoples who came to our shores. And sadly too has seen the departure of millions of Irish men and women who today are scattered all over the world.
So let us go then, you and I, on an Irish journey, an hour's journey only, but endless in the imagination. A journey right through this beautiful country of ours, along the coasts and into the very lands and territories of your own Irish ancestors.
These are the majestic cliffs of Moher. They stand defiant, holding back the relentless waves. Below, the broad Atlantic stretches all the way 3,000 miles beyond to the New World. When you stand on these cliffs, you stand on the edge of Ireland, you stand on the edge of Europe. Inland from here lies the fair land of Éireann, Ireland, the home of your ancestors.
This is the story of your proud Foley heritage. We'll trace your name from its earliest Irish form of O'Fallua and follow its exciting journey through the events of Irish history, charting the changing fortunes of your illustrious and noble family. Through ancient castles and aging ruins, we will rediscover the stories of the Foleys, from the days of the plundering O'Fallua to the civic spirit of John Foley. We will discover too how your name has changed over the centuries, and we will hear of Michael Foley, who set sail for America in the 19th century, and through him discover how you can start the search for your own ancestors. A search which will reveal the spirit of courage and resilience that is the Foley heritage, a spirit and a heritage which has seen the name survive for nearly 1,000 years. Irish surnames, which began 1,000 years ago, developed in a number of ways. If a family took their father's name, they became known as Mac, like McCarthy, because Mac means the son of. But if they were called after a more remote ancestor, they used the O, which means descended from, as in, say, O'Brien. Meanwhile, the Normans often used Fitz instead of O or Mac, as in Fitzgerald, son of Gerald. Or you could be called after the job you did, as in Smith. Or the place you came from, as in Welsh, from Wales. For the 60 million people throughout the world who share an Irish ancestry, St. Patrick's Day is a time for them to come together to celebrate and rejoice in their Irish identity. Although your own family may have left these shores and settled in new lands, it is still possible to trace your ancestors back to their original homelands. Tom Lindert, one of Ireland's leading authorities on genealogy, has some useful advice.
Well, it's very important that if someone's interested in doing your genealogy, that you get all your background information in your home country first. Don't just try to jump straight over to Ireland. The first thing is that you get a person that you know the most about from Ireland, be it an ancestor, their name, a date to put them in history, be it a birth date, marriage date, or death date, and then a locality, narrow that down as much as possible, be it a county or a townland. But make sure you have the information together to begin with, and then make the next step over to do research in Ireland.
Once you have located an ancestor and have some idea of where they originally came from in Ireland, the records which will allow you to trace your family history are, by and large, available to you. The first place to go to is the National Archives at the Four Courts in Dublin. Documents kept here, such as Griffith's land valuations of the 19th century and the Ty the Plotman books, are invaluable in the search for your ancestors. If we take the case of a namesake of yours, we can illustrate exactly how these documents can help you. Let's look, for example, at the case of Michael Foley. We know that Michael left Ireland for America in the 1850s, where he married. We also know that the name Foley at that time was most common in the counties of Cork, Kerry, Waterford and Roscommon. At the Four Courts in Dublin, we searched the Griffiths land valuation records and we found 3 Foley families in the record for Boyle Parish, County Roscommon. Once we found this, we checked the nearby parish churches, and in Boyle Catholic Church, we found that Michael was baptized on the 7th of July, 1845, the son of John Foley and Anne Pettit of Boyle. With this knowledge, it is possible to trace the history of Michael's family. So you see, all you need are the basic details about an ancestor, and the quest for information on your family roots can begin. The search for your ancestors is becoming easier all the time, thanks to a recent initiative called the Irish Genealogical Project. This is the Clare Heritage Centre in Corofin. The centre is at the very heart of a new and exciting development. The official surviving records relating to family history and genealogy are being collected throughout the county. They're being brought here and then put on computer. But Corofin's not alone in this. Many other heritage centres have opened up all over Ireland, so that no matter where your family comes from, you should now be able to get an accurate record of your family history. It is possible to trace your ancestors even further back beyond your immediate family, but let's start at the beginning and take a look at the history, the culture and the country which shaped your forefathers. On the Aran Islands off the west coast of Ireland stands the prehistoric fort of Dún enigmatic, poised over the ocean, its ancient builders a mystery even to this day. Over 7,000 years had passed since the first settlers arrived in Ireland. Hunting in the young forests, they slowly ventured up the river valleys, building their dwellings from rough wood and animal hide, and forming small communities hidden in the forest. 2,500 years before Christ, they had developed a society that was stable enough and wealthy enough to produce these majestic dolmens. This dolmen here is the Poulnabrone dolmen, situated in North Clare in the Burren country, just another part of the wonderment that is ancient Ireland. They built mysterious circles of standing stones. These people we call the Firbolg, or the Fomorians, and the Tuatha Dé Danann, the legendary children of Dana, goddess of magic. Perhaps these early peoples were among your forebears, people who would have known the names of those who lie under the great dolmens. But older than Poulnabrone, older even than the pyramids, is the passage grave at Newgrange in County Meath. Built over 5,000 years ago and designed so that on the winter solstice each year, at the moment of sunrise, a shaft of sunlight penetrates to the very heart of the mound, illuminating the intricate spirals carved in stone. Newgrange was where they paid tribute to their now forgotten gods. These people were superb craftsmen in stone, but a new material was sweeping across Europe from Asia Minor. The Iron Age came to Ireland, and the people who introduced the new material around 500 BC were the Celts, who for almost 2,000 years ruled Ireland as kings. The Celts were a major influence on the course of Irish history and instrumental in shaping our unique Irish identity. Let's listen to what leading archaeologist Barry Raftery of University College Dublin has to say about the Celts.
Well, in the narrowest sense, the term Celtic refers to a language, but it is entirely appropriate to use the term in a broad cultural context. Now, the earliest reference to the term Celt was made by the Greeks about the 6th century BC. They just referred to a specific cultural grouping in Europe as Keltoi. We do not, of course, know whether the Celts themselves used that phrase to describe themselves. Now, in archaeological terms, the Celtic culture begins about 700 BC in Europe, continues until it was destroyed by the Romans around about the birth of Christ. And archaeologists have divided this culture into two broad phases, named after two major find spots in Europe: an earlier phase, which is called the Hallstatt culture, and a later phase, which is called the Latin culture. This is the Latin Celts who are best exemplified in the archaeological record. There are very serious problems of archaeological interpretation. But what we can say is that the earliest indications of contact with the Celtic culture abroad appears in Ireland around about 600 BC, when there are some indications of a Hallstatt presence in the country. We have some Hallstatt material, but it's not very substantial. Around about 300 BC, there's a greater body of archaeological material in the country, which we can certainly equate with the Celtic groups. In many ways, it displays native Irish idiosyncrasies which set it apart from the material in the Latin areas outside the country. We have a vast body of Celtic literature surviving in the country. We have the epic cycle, the Ulster cycle, we have the Fíneachta, we have a whole range of mythology, we have a superb collection of early Irish nature poetry and other poetry, but probably the principal legacy of the Celts, the most enduring, is our Celtic personality. We certainly have a distinctive personality, a warmth, a friendliness. The classical commentators describe the belligerent character of the Celts. Perhaps we have inherited that too, to a certain extent. But we certainly have a distinctive Celtic personality which sets us apart from all other European cultures.
A small island on the edge of Europe, the island of your ancestors was divided up between a number of major Celtic clans. In the south, in what is now Munster, were the Oinacht and the Dalcash. In Connacht, to the west, were the Ibrin. In the province of Leinster were the Hinslig, and to the north, in Ulster, were the Nael. These clans were in time joined by the great Viking and Norman families. It would seem that the Foleys descend indirectly from the powerful Oinacht. This is the Rock of Cashel, the ancient capital of the southern provinces of Ireland. It lies at the very heart of the Foley story. Many of the magnificent buildings here date from the 8th century, when Cashel was at the height of its power and its glory. You see, from here, you command a view of the rich rolling acres of Munster and South Leinster, for hundreds of years the homeland of the Foleys. From the great central plains in the north to the bays and inlets of the south coast, the varied and majestic landscape of Munster is the backdrop for the story of the Foleys. A story which begins in the dark and distant days of the 11th century in beautiful County Waterford. It was quite common at this time for the Irish clans with bases on the coast to set sail for other coastal settlements and attack them for plunder. One of the most successful and daring of the plundering chieftains was a man called Foley. The name Foley is derived from the Old Irish word for plunderer. When your ancestor died, a relative, probably a grandson, took his name as a mark of respect, becoming Ó Foley. And in doing so, he became the first Irishman in history to call himself Foley, because it is from this Old Irish surname that your present-day name is derived. The name of Foley can be translated as descendant of Fowler, and we have seen that Fowler means plunderer, so what your Foley name means is descendant of Fowler, the plunderer. Earliest records of the Ó Foley indicate that they were a powerful family in the south of Munster, and their territory extended over much of what is now County Waterford. Their seafaring tradition took them to many distant parts of the country, and the name spread in due course throughout Ireland. To Today you'll find Foleys in most counties, but most especially in Cork and Kerry. But like most Irish families with strong roots associated with a particular place, the greatest number of Foleys in Ireland today can be found in the homelands of their ancestors. Hurling, Ireland's national sport, is reminiscent of the time when the great clans of Ireland battled for land power and the high kingship. It was the strength of Christianity that forged the first real bonds of unity in Ireland, for the Irish took very well to Christianity, so well indeed that in a very short time her monks had established some of the most important ecclesiastical centres in the Christian world. Here in Glendalough in County Wicklow, I always think the sense of Ireland's Christian past is particularly strong. There had been small settlements of monks scattered along the Irish coast for some time, but it took St. Patrick to bring together the old religion of the Celts and the new Christianity. This new Irish Christianity turned out to be a powerful crusading force. With the collapse of the Roman Empire, Europe was once more plunged into the Dark Ages. And strangely enough, that's what gave us, I think, our first emigrants, the young Irish monks who left their Irish monasteries and brought the flame of Christianity back into that pagan continent. At home in Ireland, the monks built the unique round towers, originally as bell towers, and then later used them for keeping safe their priceless chalices and manuscripts. In their workrooms, the monks channeled their passionate Celtic sensitivity into glowing colour and intricate artwork. And certainly, the greatest and most beautiful of the manuscripts is the Book of Kells, now in the library of Trinity College, Dublin. The work of the monasteries, however, was to be disturbed by the arrival of the Vikings. For 200 years, they came as pirates to plunder gold from the great Irish monasteries. However, in 1014, they were finally defeated in battle by the High King of Ireland, Brian Boru, after which they became fully integrated into Irish society. The Vikings built Ireland's first towns and cities, including Dublin, Wexford, Cork, and Limerick, and their commercial ability is reflected today in Dublin's famous Moore Street Market. The Vikings left an indelible impression on the Irish. Their decline, coupled with the death of Brian Boru, meant that the high kingship of Ireland was, so to speak, up for grabs. There followed almost a century of political instability and unrest, while the greater Irish families fought amongst themselves for the title of High King of Ireland. It was an eventful century in the history of the Foley clan. You see, they came under the rule of Diarmaid MacMurrough of Leinster, and when he made off with the wife of Tiernan O'Rourke, the whole of Leinster, your family included, were to suffer the wrath of the O'Rourke of Breffni and his ally, the O'Connor, as they marched to avenge that terrible insult right into the very heart of Leinster. The 100 years of shifting alliances and bitter infighting left not only your ancestors, but the whole country unprepared for the next wave of newcomers to land on Irish soil. The Normans, led by the great warrior Strongbow, arrived in 1169. Heavily protected by their coats of mail, they moved like modern tanks through the Irish countryside. They had arrived as mercenaries at the request of the deposed King of Leinster, but a combination of their military might and an attraction to the land of your ancestors induced them to make a more permanent foothold. The Normans immediately set about building huge stone castles of white throughout the country. These fortresses were designed both for protection and to intimidate the native Irish. Over 800 years later, many of these castles still stand, a testament to the skill of their builders. Within a year, they had captured Dublin itself, and from the high parapets of their various castles all over Ireland, they surveyed the conquered lands. Very soon, they were to proceed to supervise the division of their new country.
The coming of the Normans was to have a profound effect on the fortunes of the Foley family. You see, situated as they were in the county of Waterford, they were soon to come up against the might and power of the Norman war machine, and indeed they were no match for it at all. But in the fields of politics and diplomacy, the Foleys were well able for the Normans, and indeed were able to hold on to their lands, their power and their influence by shrewd alliances and even shrewder intermarriages.
Following his victories in battle, Strongbow took the hand of the King of Leinster's daughter, Eva, in marriage, and less than 2 years later, he had taken the crown for himself.
Stony towers are not always protective, for here in Waterford, at Reginald's Tower, the marriage of Strongbow and Eva started a trend that would eventually undermine Norman influence in Ireland. You see, within a century, the Normans and the Irish intermarried, and the Normans adopted the Irish language and culture to a degree that made the English King John declare, "The Normans are more Irish than the Irish themselves."
The Norman invasion meant that many noble old Irish families were displaced from their lands. One such family were the Foleys, who had established themselves as chieftains of lands in Kildare. The Foleys were so completely dispossessed that they were thrown into circumstances of dire poverty, so much so that very often they found themselves on the wrong side of the Norman laws. One such man was David O'Foley. David had attacked and robbed a Norman moneylender and would have faced a hefty sentence, but for the fact that his Norman landlords vouched for his sound character and declared that he was compelled to act the way he did in order to feed his family. In time, though, through shrewd intermarrying, the Foleys re-established themselves as lords of the manor. Here at Bunratty Castle, the vibrant atmosphere of that period can be experienced in a banquet that is faithfully recreated using historical records from the time.
My noble lords and ladies, my noble guests, the entry of your host this evening, the Earl of Thomond, Mr. Joe Lynch.
Food and drink in the old style, music and song. This is how your ancestors entertained their friends.
This castle now awakes. Its ancient glory stirs. The clink of mail and laughter fills its halls, and we inherit all its chivalry. Bunratty bids you welcome. A toast to all you hear. Sláinte is sail. Sláinte is sail.
Let the banquet begin.
The Foleys' re-emergence as a landed family is reflected in the story of John Foley of Clonmel. John was one of a number of the leading citizens of Clonmel to vouch for the good character of a soldier who faced dishonourable discharge from the army. The soldier in question, Lieutenant Peter Flower, stood accused of repeated drunkenness and whoremongering in his previous command. Thanks to the actions of John and his fellow referees, who declared him to be a man of piety and a bother to nobody, Lieutenant Flower retained his post. During the 1500s, the power of the Celtic chieftains began to wane under sustained military pressure from the forces of the English crown. This, in turn, led to a series of rebellions.
The last great Celtic revolt ended here at Kinsale in 1601. It had been led by the mighty Hugh O'Neill of Tyrone. In the year 1609, O'Neill and many of the other Irish chieftains left our shores. This was called the Flight of the Earls. It heralded the end of the old Celtic ways. Now it was a new Ireland, new kings, new centres of power. The Flight of the Earls is a testament to the concept of Ireland as an independent nation, the Celtic aristocracy choosing exile rather than submission. To consolidate their power in Ireland, the new rulers sent out clerks to record the names of Ireland. Unable to speak the Irish language, these clerks did not attempt to properly translate the indigenous names, but rather made approximate and phonetic translations. As you travel through Ireland today, you will notice how the signposts carry evidence of that name-changing process which began so long ago. For example, Báile an Mhuircheig, meaning the town of the Murphys, became Ballymurphy. Castlán y Chonil simply became Castle Connell. The name Foley also went through its own changes. At the hands of English-speaking clerks who knew no better, the old Irish name O Fálua, with its many different dialectical pronunciations, became O Foley and even O Fowler. In most cases, the O was dropped, but all in all, the spelling was the best approximation English clerks could make to the sound of this proud, ancient Irish name. The essential Irish culture, however, remains strong and vibrant, and despite continued assault, it has remained so to this day. The Irish have always been proud of their heritage and culture, and nowhere is this more evident than in the art of heraldry. And here to tell you more about that is the former Chief Herald of Ireland, Gerard Slevin.
Heraldry had its origin in the fact that the knight in medieval times, going into warfare, was completely encased in armour, including his head. So there was no means of knowing who he was. So it became the practice to paint on his shield certain emblems or signs or symbols as a means of identification. Heraldry has always had an extraordinary fascination for people, whatever it is about the shield shape and its contents, and in due course, this personal practice spread to cities, universities, institutions, and is still very active. The primary purpose, as I have suggested, was identification. And I suppose that is still the essential purpose of heraldry, is personal or institutional identification.
Your coat of arms is a window to your heritage. Each part is full of stories and secrets. The colour of the shield denotes peace and sincerity. It is divided horizontally by a band of fess, which in heraldic terms is engrailed. Engrailed lines signify a family with strong roots in the land. Surrounding the fess are 3 black flowers or cinquefoil contained within a black border. The cinquefoil represent hope and joy, and black is the colour of constancy, antiquity and honour. The crest, which is placed above the shield, has a line in what is termed the rampant position. The line is an ancient heraldic symbol borne by families who have distinguished themselves in battle and signifies deathless courage. The motto is in Latin. It reads ut prosim, which means that I may be of use.
Many Irish people certainly are entitled to use arms, yes. The registers of the office of arms, the genealogical office as it is now, the office of the Chief Herald, has registers going back many centuries.
The 17th century saw England convulsed by 2 civil wars in which Ireland inevitably became involved. The The Second War was actually fought entirely on Irish soil between 1688 and 1691 and led to disastrous consequences for the Irish.
(1691) saw the ending of the Williamite Wars with the signing of the Treaty of Limerick, signed on this very stone. The wars were fought between two kings, William of Orange and James II, both of whom laid claim to the throne of England. In the event, victory went to King William. For the Irish who supported James II, exile seemed to be the only honourable option.
Known to history as the Wild Geese, these honourable soldiers of fortune sailed from Limerick to Europe, bringing with them the surnames of Ireland. There were many Foleys included among those outlawed for treason in the province of Munster under the terms of the Treaty of Limerick. These Foleys, faced with the prospect of submitting to King William, instead chose exile as the only honourable option. Many distinguished themselves fighting in the armies of France, Spain and Austria, forming Irish brigades in those great countries. Some knew fortune, but all carried with them a burning pride and an unbreakable spirit in what was indeed part of the first great wave of Irish emigration. From the days of the early Christian missionaries to the present day, emigration has been an integral part of the history of the Irish people. From this small nation, millions of Irish people have traveled the world over to Europe, Asia, the Americas, Africa, and Australasia. Although many left in search of adventure or to find their fortunes, many others didn't have the choice. In the aftermath of the Wild Geese, which had seen the best and brightest of their day depart, Ireland was to undergo many changes, the most dramatic of which was the massive transfer of land ownership.
As the land changed, so too did the politics. In 1801, the Irish Parliament in Dublin was dissolved, and as the last vestiges of power dwindled, so too did the wealth of the country, and the land sank into poverty. In 1845, a blight arrived. The potato, the staple diet of the Irish people, was totally destroyed. So began the Great Irish Famine, and so too began the greatest migration of the Irish people.
Plentiful supplies of foodstuffs were exported to Britain, while the Irish people were faced with emigration in order to survive. A letter written in 1847 captures the sense of devastation. It is early morning as I write this last note before departing. We now join a huge army forced to leave their native land. The heavy morning mist is a fitting curtain for the final scene, the climax of all our strivings against impossible odds. I cannot help but glance back through the pages of our history to the years when Ireland was a beacon of learning and faith whose light spread to all parts of Europe. God grant that those days of glory may someday return. Irish people emigrated in their hundreds of thousands. They set sail from Cove, Liverpool and Belfast. Cramped together on overcrowded ships, rife with hunger and disease, they arrived in Montreal, New York and Boston. In Australia, famine refugees followed those who had been transported there as convicts. Many of these convicts had been expelled from their home country on charges such as stealing bread, others for belonging to revolutionary organizations. Despite their impoverished beginnings, the contribution made by those emigrants to their new countries was enormous. In the building of the modern world, from the late 17th century right up to the present day, the Irish have played a vital part in whatever society or culture they have settled in. Today, people of Irish descent number in excess of 70 million worldwide. The Foleys have ever held a distinguished place in Irish history. People like the sculptor John Henry Foley, whose work adorns the streets and squares of Dublin City, and the Reverend Daniel Foley, who compiled one of the first Irish dictionaries. The list of distinguished Foleys is constantly growing. Many centuries have passed since the first proud Oinuk chieftain took the name Foley. Now when you come to Ireland, there are many places you'll want to see. But as a Foley, you must come here to the Ladies' View in the beautiful Lakes of Killarney in the county of Kerry. There you most certainly find, I think, the gateway to the Foley kingdom, the gateway to your heritage. The Foleys have been at the forefront of Irish history for nearly 1,000 years, and those Foleys who chose emigration and exile brought their traditions of courage and independence with them. As a Foley, you can be proud of your heritage.